Welcome to Let Them Talk. I'm your host, Paul DiRienzo, and we got another great show in store. Joining me is the lovely Marni Halasa here, and we're going to be talking about, you might know Marni. She's well known at Occupy Wall Street. She was a guest over at WBAI, where you can't see the person.
Yes,
right?
yes.
With me, and when we did that a few weeks ago, and she's been active in many causes, many important causes in New York City. And one of those causes we're going to talk about, because there's so many things we could talk about if we got together and talk about these things that you're involved in.
Right.
But we're going to focus on small business, because you're a small business person, which I didn't know until we met last time.
Yes.
I had no idea that you and your partner own a coffee shop.
Yes.
And you run a coffee shop in Midtown, I guess?
Red Eye Coffee on 9th Avenue, right across the street from B&H Photo. The best coffee on the planet.
Oh, I used to eat at the Chinese takeout next door there.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Right. Well, I teach in that area a lot because I'm a teacher, and there's a lot of business schools in that area that I teach.
Oh, right.
So great. All right, so I know the area, and I love B&H.
Exactly.
Anybody's got a show
Everybody does.
at this place knows about B&H. So great. So these are all hometown places. So you're a hometown business person.
Yes, I am.
And so that's great. So we're going to talk about business. I can't think of a place more. It's amazing to me that you actually are running a small business in New York, because it seems like, where would you start? It's the most hardest thing in the world.
I have to say, it's really, really challenging. And that's part of the reason why so many small businesses now are kind of closing, because it is so difficult. And the one main thing is the rents. The rents are skyrocketing. That's why when I ran for city council, I championed something called the Small Business Job Survival Act, which would give business owners rights during the lease renewal process. So when your lease comes up for renewal, if this legislation would pass, you would get a 10-year lease, the right to renew that lease, and also binding arbitration. So it would have reasonable rent increases, like 3% rent increases. So it would be something that, if, it's all about the rent. I mean, whether you're a tenant, whether you're a small business, it's always all about the rent. So if you're able to have an affordable rent that you could afford and keep affording for 10 years as a small business, you would be able to recoup your costs, and you'll be able to survive.
Right. So let's set that out for people, because I think it may not be, people might not be familiar, viewers might not be familiar.
That's true.
With the fact that the laws that govern leases for small businesses, the first floor of your building, is way different from the laws that the tenants that benefit the tenants. Now, I've been a rent stabilized tenant for a long time in New York.
Me too. I'm rent stabilized.
So we know that every year or 2 years you get a increase based on what the mayor and the people at the Rent Stabilization Association and all those folks come together, and they decide what the rent's going to be. And it's going to be 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%. Sometimes they hit you with like $80 charges and weird things out of nowhere. They don't do, fortunately, not too often. But they basically, it's a reasonable, considering...
It's a reasonable incremental increase.
Right. That's what the idea is supposed to be anyway.
Yes, rent stabilization. So this bill would actually be kind of like a rent stabilization for small businesses.
Which doesn't have that.
Which doesn't happen, because as I think New Yorkers, every New Yorker knows, once a lease ends and you're a small business, the landlord is then able to increase the rent to an outrageous amount. And as a small business owner, you have no rights during the lease renewal process. And that's why all these businesses are closing. And that's why a lot of New Yorkers, a lot of anti-gentrification groups, are going crazy and really advocating, because all their wonderful and loved businesses in the neighborhoods are closing. And now what's replacing them are banks and Dwayne Reeds and chain stores that can afford.
Target.
Yeah,
Target. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Around the corner.
So it's really changing the character and the makeup of New York City. And a lot of us who've been in New York for a while, and even people that come here, we come here and we live here, and we choose to live here because we love that kind of like neighborhood character of all the mom and pop stores.
Yeah, so let me be the devil's advocate. Okay, this is business. Business is business. When your lease runs out, they can get whatever they can. It's a different environment 10 years after you sign a lease. The end of the lease comes, and there's more money, there's more richer people, they want different things.
Right. Well, I mean, it comes down to what sort of city do we want to live in. Yeah. And I think the majority of New Yorkers They want a city where you have your mom and pop stores, and it adds to the character in the community. I mean, like really what we're missing, I feel like, is community in so many neighborhoods, and I think that's what New Yorkers want. And so we have to, we have to sort of pressure our elected officials. What kind of city do we want? And if we want those small, interesting mom and pop stores where it's you see the owner every day. Like people come to Red Eye Coffee because my husband is there every day. He knows their names. He knows their kids' names. He knows when they're going on vacation. There's a community feel, and I think that's what New Yorkers want.
I see, right. So there, in the past, there was talk. I remember for many years, I grew up in New York, many years ago, there would be sort of rumblings that we should do something about commercial rents, and it would be squashed. Every mayor would squash it. There was It wasn't even considered.
Well,
now it's changed. There is some consideration of it.
There is. This is what I believe, and I'm going to tell it to you straight.
Yeah.
Really, what you have is have our elected officials, the mayor, Speaker Corey Johnson, everybody in City Council. They all get outrageous amounts of real estate money.
So for their campaigns.
Yeah, for their campaigns. I'm a former City Council candidate. What I did is I ran against Corey Johnson, and what I did is I looked up 168 of his individual donors, and what I found is that out of $500,000 in campaign contributions, 335,000 were from real estate, Wall Street, nightlife, and corporate philanthropy, and those are the four hyper gentrifiers, of the city. And also, he never said no to any development. So you see that, and you also see that. I would go as far to say that City Council really has betrayed, the public, where you have Ydanis Rodriguez, huge community opposition to the Inwood rezoning. He approved that. Carlina Rivera with the Tech Hub in Union Square. Richie Torres watering down the Right to Know Act. It's endless. The list is endless where they're not acting in the community's interest.
I see. So you're bringing
and that
sort of
needs to be called out, people.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So Marni, you're taking some of the skills that you developed at Occupy Wall Street to this campaign, which is, what does that represent? What did I want to relate that the more activist approach that are making these issues more, making them more in the forefront. Like you're forcing them to have to consider something they'll never really approve.
Yeah. So I think one of the interesting things is being an occupier.
Yeah.
I mean, probably, I would say, like one of the most photographed faces of Occupy Wall Street, my costumes, that as occupiers, we're not afraid to say it like it is and call elected officials and people in power out. Yeah. So you have to hold power accountable. And that's really the only thing that, once you, spark that, it, I think, really catches on and people start to understand that, if our elected officials are not really doing what they should and acting in the public's interest, they need to change. Also, the day of the public hearing, Small Business Job Survival.
Let's talk about that, right? We're talking about politics, and actually, before we get to that, you're a candidate. You were a candidate.
I was a candidate, yes.
All right. How was that? What was that experience like?
You know what? I had a really great time. It was really interesting, and I think one of the main things is that you really get to know your community because you're walking the streets, you're talking to people, you're speaking to people. I became friends. I'm still friends with people in public housing. It's really an interesting experience. I mean, it's super challenging because if you don't have the backing of a machine, or special interest groups. I mean, I had
like a club, one of these Democratic clubs, or
Democratic clubs, but also like you need money to run a campaign. And what I did, I had sort of this personal aversion to asking for money, which I really have to get over. But I funded my own campaign. I spent about $13,000, but I ended up.
And he spent how much? $500,000?
He spent $500,000. So this is really David and Goliath.
Right.
But I think what I found out is, one person can really make a difference. And what I did is I championed this Small Business Job Survival Act. Yeah. And my editorial was right next to Corey Johnson's editorials. And City Hall insiders did tell me that they thought that my small but fierce campaign really pushed him to have this public hearing because he had, there's such a crisis. Yeah. And also maybe your viewers don't know this, but every month, like 1,200 businesses close in New York City and in the 5 boroughs, with 8,000 jobs lost to New Yorkers.
Wow.
So we really are in a crisis, and I
replaced by these chain stores that really pay minimum wage.
Right, and don't really add anything to the community. No. So, and then what you also have is the real estate industry really pushing back hard, saying that there's no crisis. You know, small businesses are doing fantastic. The businesses aren't closing. So they're doing their own PR campaign. But we can see through it because they have a vested interest. I
see that. So so let's talk about this hearing. So there was a hearing in City Hall and a protest out front.
Yeah. Oh, well, there is. So
back in October. Right?
Yeah, October 22nd was the public hearing. Yeah. And there was a noon rally. But my group is Community Control of Land Use. We put on our own press conference at 10, really in opposition to the noon rally, because we wanted to say, listen, we got to hold our city council officials, elected officials, accountable.
They all do. I noticed that they all pile out to these press conferences where they all smile and say all these things.
They say all the right things.
Right.
All the right things.
It's hit every note.
When it comes to the vote, they either water down the legislation or they vote completely in opposition to what the community wants.
Well, Carlina Rivera was a perfect example.
Perfect example. Yeah, I call her the goddess of displacement. You know, so.
Well, she says, you know, a lot of them say, well, they're bringing in jobs. That's their responsibility. However, plenty of people I've interviewed say, we're destroying our neighborhood by these jobs you want to bring in. It's not leaving us any place to live.
Yeah, and that's not a good reason. When you have to displace a lot of businesses and immigrant businesses, you can't really do that. You can't replace one with the other and then justify it.
So did you have some coverage of the rally you guys did at 10 in the morning?
I did. So what's interesting is Fox News was there, which was very interesting. But I think because we were holding the Democrats accountable, I think they liked that narrative. Right. But we did. We got some play, and it was good. I mean, what I was happy with is that we had the city's lead anti-gentrification activists all there. Mm-hmm. So for me, I started this group, Community Control of Land Use. I wasn't sure who was going to show up, but CUNY professor Tom Angotti, Ann McDermott from Take Back NYC, Robert from Not One More Block, Sandy Rayburn, Preserve Brooklyn Neighborhoods. A lot of really, really great veteran activists. Steve Barrison from the Small Business Congress. They were all there really in support that the narrative really has to change. We have to hold our elected officials accountable.
Right. So because these rent increases, we're not talking about small rent increases. I mean, what I've seen is in my neighborhood in the Lower East Side, I've seen many neighborhood businesses go out with massive increases in rent. Massive.
Like it'll go from $7,000 to $27,000. And just when the lease ends, the landlord can do whatever they want. Right. And that's really not right. And you know,
do they do that to get rid of the person, or because they really are going to charge that much in the end?
Well, I think they're waiting for a bank or like a chain store to come in. So then what you also have is you have urban blight.
Mm-hmm. An empty store.
Empty stores, Bleecker Street, empty stores. The Upper West Side is like a ghost town. Mm-hmm. And there was one study, I think Gail Brewer's office, she did a study where there's like almost 200 empty stores on Broadway. So like we really are in a crisis and that something needs to be done. So
I see that, like they used to do that, and they might still do that with apartments, is that hold them off, warehouse them.
Exactly.
Waiting for the market to change.
Right. And I mean, it's interesting. People are talking about a lot of different solutions, but the solution that I really believe is the real solution is making the rent affordable. Mm-hmm. Once you have that, if the rent is affordable, I think everything falls into place.
Do they tie, some places they tie in the rent to how much the business actually grosses?
I mean,
I've heard of stories like that. Is that accurate?
Possibly. You know, I mean, for me, I just hear the stories of it was $7,000, then it went up to $27,000.
Yeah, that's what I hear too, as much as one shot like that.
Right.
I see. So what would you like, so how do you think there's a chance in hell that that in a city that's so capitalistic, so business oriented, where the minnows are food for the sharks, that a small business person would ever have any hope here, and that maybe New York is coming to the last days.
I mean, that's the thing is like
the waters are coming in.
It looks like this is we've created this sort of playground for the rich.
Yeah.
And is there hope? I would like to think there's some hope. What I do worry about is that the bill will be watered down so much where it might be worthless. So that's what I'm a little bit worried about. But I think if everybody calls their council member, tweets the speaker, Corey Johnson, and you sort of really make your message heard and make your voice heard, I think that's one thing that all New Yorkers can do.
What's the name of the bill again?
Small Business Job Survival Act.
And who's
SBJ? If you go on Twitter, it's hashtag SBJSA.
SBJSA.
But honestly, call up your council member. Like, call them and, rip them a new one. I mean, I think that's what really needs to happen. I think the narrative is, I think people need to be more angry and outraged. And I think all of us sort of walk around in polite society and we're not angry, and we talk in these soft tones. And I come from an Arabic family. We're like, what? We talk with our hands. We get mad. I think it's something that outrage is an important thing, and I feel like it can really actually do something
towards like preserving this city as a community.
Yes.
And as neighborhoods, which it traditionally has been, a city of neighborhoods.
Of
and it still is in many ways, but they're picking areas and they're totally destroying them.
Right.
And I
mean, it's interesting too, there's the aspect of the city selling public land for $1 to developers.
Oh yeah.
So for the developer to develop. Well, why can't they sell that public land to a community for $1 and have the community have control over that land use? I mean, that's something that people are starting to talk about a little bit, but you have to really fight the real estate industry. So we're up against a huge fight. But I think when I talk to New Yorkers, New Yorkers are they're on my side. They want to see a community. They want to see their neighborhoods intact.
Yes. Well, the prices
we're on the right side of history.
The prices just keep going up and up in these stores. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like, you used to be able to buy a bottle of shampoo for $1. Now it's like $6, $7.
Exactly.
And that's just one example. It's all across and when these stores come in, they're paying high rents. All of a sudden, you see the prices go way up.
No, definitely.
And I love the fact that I know people love Whole Foods, but they were supposedly brought their prices down.
I know because they were.
I'm scratching my head looking for the low prices. I'm going in there, forget it.
I know.
Yeah. It's for a whole different group of people. Somebody who can afford to drop $100 for groceries on one day.
Right.
For one day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but I would suggest if people are interested in joining me and other anti-gentrification activists in this fight, my Facebook page is Community Control of Land Use. Contact me through Facebook, and I hold a lot of events. Actually, right now, what I'm trying to organize is a town hall about the Small Business Job Survival Act because we had the public hearing. So what's next? So I would like to invite people to, to sit in on a town hall and actually get feedback from the public on what they would like to see happen. Yeah. And it's a way for the public to have a voice in land use issues.
Right, great. I'm glad you're doing this work. It was 6 years ago this week was Sandy, right?
Oh, I know, yes.
And when we lost all our electricity, and it was the communities of New York
Occupy Sandy.
Right,
yes.
that got involved, and the city was nowhere to be seen.
I know.
After wanting to power wash us off of Liberty Street.
And that's a perfect example of the community strength coming together to solve problems.
So they can do that. So that way, because I think what happens is that, I feel it myself, because the more we talk about the horrors of the situation, the more I wonder, in New York City, is it possible, could we ever change this city?
Exactly.
However, it has happened.
It has happened, yes.
We still have, I don't know if you're familiar with La Plaza Cultural. And I'll never forget, people took over an empty piece of land and turned it into a community space. And this city came here and said, oh, we're going to use it. We're going to take it away from you.
Right.
And we still have it to this day, all these years later. And, and in fact, I'm not saying this should happen necessarily, but the person who was most vociferous wound up going to jail for corruption charges.
Wow. Wow.
But I find that interesting in the sense of sometimes these folks come with all this power. You can't resist this. We're the most powerful people in the world. We have Jared Kushner and Donald Trump behind us.
Right.
We're going to bulldoze you, and then we wind up winning.
Well, and to your point,
and there's lots of examples of that in New York history.
And also, CUNY professor Tom Angotti, he wrote a book called Zoned Out.
Yeah.
And he chronicles, there are many, many examples like you're talking about, where the community has control of the land. And once they got it, they were able to, actually implement what the community wanted.
Absolutely.
So it can be done, and it can be done again.
Yeah, before our time, but they stopped them from building an expressway across Lower Manhattan. Grand Street would be an elevated expressway.
Oh, wow.
And they stopped them from building an elevated expressway along West Street, along the Hudson River.
Right. And also the stadium on the west side.
Oh, that unbelievable.
That was Knicks too.
Right. And overall, so there are many, many examples of folks winning.
Right. No, it's
there
true.
Are.
It's true.
And there's big struggles going on. I've been, on the housing side, we've been talking about Chinatown and Cherry Street and how they want to build these huge towers and two bridges.
Right.
And one after another, and not go through the Euler process. And,
the Euler process
and people are fighting it. So it's a nonstop battle.
Right.
Now,
it is a nonstop battle.
Right. If you want to save your city. Now, why do you love New York City so much? A lot of people would just think I'm crazy even living here at all, and would just leave the first chance. If this happened to them in a small town, Wisconsin, they move to the next one.
No, exactly. But there's something about, like, us New Yorkers, it's in our DNA, it's in our blood. The umbilical cord is tethered to New York City. I mean, we're going to stay.
Right.
But I think we want to. If we need to fight, we have to fight, and we can win.
It is winnable. It is winnable. That's wonderful. So, tell me a little bit about how are you born and raised in New York, or did you come here?
No, actually, I'm from Akron, Ohio, but I went to college and law school in Pittsburgh, and then I went to the journalism school at Columbia.
Oh, Pittsburgh. That's sad. That's
I know,
Pittsburgh's in the news.
It's terrible. Yeah. So. But then I was a legal journalist for a number of years. I was a reporter and editor for the New York Law Journal. And then I was a freelancer, but then I also started teaching figure skating because I'm a figure skater. So actually, it's interesting. My life is sort of morphed where I'm
looking at you. You don't have your skates on.
No skates. But I'm a professional figure skater, and I coach. I have a nationally ranked figure skating team called the Skyrink All-Stars. We've been nationally ranked for 6 years. But also, I ran for council last year, and it really changed my life.
How did you become politicized? What politicized?
Well, I was always political with Occupy, but more on a performance artistic bent. And then, I already have these skills, as a lawyer and a reporter. Sure. So when I ran for council, it was really just like a perfect fit. And I didn't realize how much I loved it. I loved just, if you're an activist, you know this, if you're an activist and you want to improve people's lives, and then you meet people and, you really want to help them. So it's important.
Right. And so do you think, or is it possible, or are small business people, they're all over the place, they have their own interests, their own lives, it's like in New York, it's like corralling mice. Can you get everybody together? Yeah?
It's challenging, but I think the narrative that there's a crisis, because there really is a crisis, I think that's bringing a lot of people together.
Right.
And I think when you have when you're morally correct, and I think you pressure the elected officials by calling them, writing them, emailing them, tweeting at them. I think if you do that, they can't ignore the crisis. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do.
All right, great. So where do you go from here? What's your next plan?
So, my next plan is to have this town hall.
Okay, tell us about that a little bit more. When is that going to happen again? Repeat it.
Right now I'm trying to find space. I would like to have it in like the next 3 weeks. But just invite the public and invite people to speak about this, just to educate the public on what's going on and what they can do. Because I think often people don't really understand what's going on. I think also with our elected officials, not to harp on this, but I'm going to keep on harping on it.
Go right ahead.
But I think people see this view of, Corey Johnson dances in all the parades. He seems like such a nice guy. But when you look at his real estate contributions, a totally different picture emerges where he's meeting with real estate lobbyists. He's approving developments that perhaps are, regular New Yorkers can't afford to live there. Yeah. A different picture emerges, and really the money is who you see who these council members work for. Right. So I feel like unless I went through this this experience running for council, I also would not know kind of how things really work. But now that I know, like also there's a lot of these groups, a lot of these tenant groups, housing groups. You know, even at the hearing, there was a Brooklyn housing group that testified against the bill. But also that, you know, a lot of these groups get money from city council. So they were probably leaned on by city council, like, you got to say this. Really? So a lot of groups do that. So, I mean, before I ran, I didn't know this sort of stuff. Right. So now that I know, I feel like it's really important to tell New Yorkers how it really is.
Right. And what's the antidote?
Well, the antidote is, I think, you know, more political engagement from everybody. But the antidote is to pressure our elected officials however they can. I mean, you know, it's interesting. I don't know, like you see somebody out, see Mayor de Blasio, like just what happened with Mayor de Blasio and the activist group Vocal. I mean, he was at the gym and they came in and they said, what are you doing with the homeless population? Why aren't you building affordable housing? So, you know, so homeless families, homeless women and children can actually have a home to live in. And they take
40 to 110,000 a year. That's what affordable is.
Right, right, exactly. So once they tape that, that pressures him, and now he has to meet with them and actually has to justify himself.
Well, Vocal's pretty good. They're pretty vocal.
Vocal's great. Oh my God, they're amazing. Yeah.
Right. And you have to be
But I think it's like that. I think people have to do that, and it is challenging because I think people are working maybe 2 jobs, 3 jobs. They have children. You know, it's challenging.
Right, so you have to really just get there in their face.
I mean, even like get there in their face, but even if you just do like 3 things a day, do 3 tweets or like, you know, 3 phone calls. You know, I mean, people can find time to do that. So.
Well, that's what Trump's people have been doing.
I know, yes.
If we could do it, it'd be nice about it.
Right.
Right, exactly. Do at least half as much. Great. Well, last half a minute, how can people get in touch with you and stay in touch with you?
Go to my Facebook page, Community Control of Land Use, and I post pretty regularly. And you know, whenever I organize, or there's other anti-gentrification groups that organize, I mean, I'll try to put everybody in touch with everybody else. Yeah. I seem to have a niche for organizing press conferences.
Good for you.
I did the press conference at City Hall. I did the press conference for Occupy Wall Street.
Are you running again?
You know, I'd like to. I would like to. And I really would like to because I feel like it raises issues. And, you know, often I feel like you need machine support to win, but look at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That's my girl.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
it was
you.
wonderful. Marni Halasa joining us.